Welcome to Terror Rules Podcast, your favorite accidental podcast. Today's episode, Unfiltered Lies. The person behind the account that duped millions of people on the internet into believing that they are an undercover investigator, uncovering the dark truths behind what is truly going on with the efficacy of our medications, specifically ADHD medications. The account I'm talking about, of course, is Unfiltered Truth, run by an anonymous person who claims they work with 60 other healthcare professionals and has found some deep, dark secrets that the pharmaceutical companies are hiding from us. This account has caused mass panic, but today we're going to talk to Rowan Zeoli, a freelance journalist, investigative journalist, and stand-up comedian who has been working closely with the anonymous person behind Unfiltered Truth. And it seems like the true deep, dark secrets are coming from Unfiltered Truth themselves. You like that? All right.
The Terror Rule Podcast, where a TikTok live ended up being more so of a podcast episode. So now, episode 1, Unfiltered Lies.
I think first and foremost, I want to say I have also noticed some things with, medication changes. I started noticing it wasn't as effective a few years ago. Mm-hmm. I was like, perhaps that's, my health, something to do with my health.
There's definitely a combination of things, but this issue with distribution and the issues with manufacturing, actually, let me pull this up right now. I've been doing a lot of research into it. There are a lot of books about how this is all, how these manufacturers and how these companies are doing a lot of stuff just for, and another book, doing all of this just for profit rather than doing it out of some kindness in their hearts, and how when you're chasing profit over patient care, you're always going to cut corners and people are going to suffer for it.
Absolutely. And I know, especially with it got to the point where I had to start just getting a dispense as written, consistent manufacturer, because every time, I know a lot of people experience this, every time you go to the pharmacy, suddenly it's another generic that you've never seen before. And the medicine is not effective, tons of side effects. And I started even developing, it seemed similar to a mast cell activation reaction. Almost like anaphylaxis sort of kind of stuff, which I had never experienced before. So now that I've been, of course, the medication I take now is not I feel it's not as effective as it used to be. However, it's more consistent and it doesn't give me these terrible side effects. That being said, when the shortage happened, I know everyone was talking about it because it was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? And that whole shortage thing, maybe we can touch a bit on that a little bit later, because I would like to know your thoughts on that, because I have a feeling these things are related, especially because in the media, it didn't seem like they could get a straight answer one way or another regarding why.
Because they're not required to. You can say whatever you want. There's really no oversight or regulation over why is there a shortage?
Exactly. And it just seemed like, oh, well, it's because too many people were diagnosed during the pandemic. Oh, well, the DEA. Oh, well, they just
oh, well, a labor shortage. Oh,
right. It seems to have resolved itself for the most part.
So actually super not. The shortage is supposed to allegedly be extended kind of indefinitely. People have given an end date of maybe August. But an interesting thing is that Takeda, the manufacturer of Vyvanse specifically, only just announced a shortage a couple days ago, or a week ago or so. So after all this time of all these reports, they had never allegedly had a shortage, despite every other ADHD stimulant medication reporting a shortage. And then now all of a sudden Takeda's yeah, no, our Vyvanse, there's going to be a shortage of lisdexamfetamine. That is going to be affecting, I think it's 40 milligram, 50 milligram, and 70 milligram. And that is those are going to be resolved at different dates, some in July, some in September.
Didn't the word is escaping me, they had basically a proprietary formulation?
So they had the patent on Vyvanse.
Patent, yeah. Didn't that just expire?
So that expired in February. So that's actually what I noticed when I started this investigation in February, noticing that all these people had been saying that they had been reporting this ineffective medication. Around the same time, February 24th, Takeda lost their exclusive patent to make lisdexamfetamine, which is now going to be generic. but then they're going to lose their full exclusivity to it in August. However, another thing is that all of these companies have a history, like specifically Teva is going through a massive lawsuit right now that I think they just had to pay like billions upon billions of dollars for doing a pay for delay where they would pay other companies to not put out generics of their brand name medication. So they would continue to make profit off of it. And then they would be the only source available for this type of medication.
Interesting. Teva's the one I have found to be most effective for me. But the confusing part is Teva makes, specifically for Adderall, they make both generic and Adderall, like the original formulation. They make both. And I, for the life of me, and my doctor can't figure it out either, I don't know which one I've been getting.
So the confusing part about that is that it's basically like, you're from New York, when you go to Canal Street and you see all the bags, like you see a Gucci bag or a Versace bag, and it's like, this looks exactly the same. Because it's made in the same factory, it's just made at night where they're like doing it off the books. And so there can be a few flaws in it, and it's not as regulated, but it's made in the exact same place.
Got it. Okay. And maybe I must be probably getting the generic form then, I would assume anyway, because of insurance.
Another interesting thing is like the generic patents that people make can get sold around. So another company that people have been having a lot of issue with is Lannett. And Lannett Manufacturing just announced bankruptcy. So they are doing a financial restructuring currently with Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And Teva just announced that they are going to be pulling back on their generic manufacturing operations because it's no longer as profitable as it used to be.
Interesting. So there was definitely, I think, like you said, there's definitely something there. There's something to look into. I know that a Bottle of Lies book I've heard a lot of good things about, and this is not a new phenomenon. This is, anything, capitalism and pharmaceuticals, that it's a recipe for disaster, and we've seen this many times. But I feel as though, some of the answers are, my guess is probably something similar to whatever has happened a million times in the past with the, pharmaceutical companies cutting corners. But then I saw Unfiltered Truth's videos, and my thing is I'm probably too trusting of people, number one. Same. But I do tend to err on the side of caution and not just like go with it. However, I feel like as a country, we are very skeptical of our government. We're very skeptical of where our, things come from. And I feel as though, whether it was conscious or not, truth, we'll call them truth, kind of use that opportunity as kind of like a bias leaning in her direction, because my whole thought was that doesn't seem outside the realm of possibility at all. And I feel that, they were piggybacking on this kind of phenomenon that was going on and this hot topic of the shortage. So when I first came across Truth's page, I was like, that's plausible. I believe it. And, I wouldn't get that many answers. One time I asked, how can I, because my whole thought was like, this is probably going to be a class action at some point. If it is what Truth was saying it was, which Truth wasn't really saying exactly what it was, but Truth was indicating that this is something much bigger, much more nefarious, much darker than just your typical run of the mill, pharmaceutical companies cutting corners. Like there's something much deeper and darker going on here that is dangerous. And so I had reached out and said, hey, is there, I've got a few of these, pills left over from these weird generics that gave me weird side effects. Where would you suggest I get them tested? And Truth was supposed to send me an email with the location to send them for testing. Now, Truth said they were the testing was expensive. And I have heard this from other, lab techs and stuff. It's very expensive to test the efficacy of these drugs. But, basically it was kind of like, because if I can help get the word out, sort of, maybe I could like send some her way, perhaps. And I never heard back about that. The topic kind of got changed. I would get kind of random text messages, or I should say direct messages, that I've actually sent you screenshots of, being like, oh, my tires just got slashed. Oh, I just left the police station for the third time this week. So I had much less interaction with truth. I also feel, and this might be giving too much credit where credit isn't due, it may not have been a conscious thing that truth was doing. However, I'm going through my own personal battle with a hospital conglomerate that pretty much runs upstate New York.
Yeah.
And I've seen the retaliation personally. Like, I have experienced things that if I didn't have extensive documentation for, everyone would think I am delusional and paranoid.
Mm.
So, when I saw the email from Teva, the pharmaceutical company, saying, we want to offer you some money to kind of like settle this, keep this information quiet, I was like, I buy it.
Yeah, because that's something that like companies have done time and time and time again. And like, we literally have like Supreme Court like cases against people right now being like, oh, during a presidential campaign, you spent someone money to keep things quiet. Right. Like, it's just part of our culture to give hush money when you don't want someone to talk about something.
100%. And the only thing that struck me as a little bit odd was this date everyone was waiting for, this date of June 8th, the information is going to be released. And like, I was on standby because Truth was like, hey, I've already got, some ins at some news stations, which I thought was a little odd. You work in journalism too. I work in, entertainment.
I was like, if you have these connections, why are you reaching out to us?
Right. That part. And also, a news station is the liability there is so huge that no news station in their right mind, especially something like, MSNBC, CBS, like these places that she was citing, if you don't have the evidence and you can't give the evidence, they're just going to ignore you. But so that was my first thing where I was like, that's a little weird. But I was like, we'll see what happens on June 8th. I was kind of on standby because they were like, yep, I'll give you the information. We'll drop the information all at once. I was like, sure, that's cool. That's fine. And then they sent me a message saying the problem was the non-disclosure agreement expired on June 8th. Mm-hmm. Which didn't make any sense to me, because it's like, well, first of all, who did the non-disclosure agreement come from? Who was it to? What was it? What was it in regards to? And if it expired, what's the issue? It's no more non-disclosure agreement.
Then you can just talk about it.
Correct. And that was, I posted that video. I think it was right around that date.
This is the kind of thing you start to see when a very powerful corporation realizes that you're onto them, and they start to get scared that you're going to release the information you found.
And then I was doing, just a regular morning get ready live stream, and then you popped into the live stream. Mm-hmm. And I had seen a few comments of people in the video being like, hey, this person has been saying, oh, we're going to drop this information this date, and they keep delaying it. This person is not being honest about truth. And I was like, whatever. People, there's always naysayers. People, and I think it's also, I had a personal feeling of protection again with truth, because I was like, so many people say this about me and my story. Less so now. I mean, I wouldn't have this many people following my story if I didn't have receipts.
Yeah, but, exactly.
Even with receipts, I get people being like, well, I don't know if I buy it. So I had this kind of personal projecting this personal devotion to the story.
Absolutely. There's this defensiveness that comes of being like, especially with something like medication and all these issues, is because there's so much gaslighting, retaliation against it, of being like, no, this is all in your head. This is mass placebo effect. Everyone's getting manipulated into believing the medication isn't working. It's like, well, if you think something's wrong, why put it on the individual who is saying this and not like look deeper into it, which was always my issue of being like, okay, fine. Like, yes, there's a lot of things sketchy about this, but as of yet, they did not have any reason for me not to trust them, which I think goes back to what we were saying before of like, I don't understand why someone would lie about this, which I think we've kind of figured out why they might have been lying about this. But yeah, once I saw your video, I basically jumped in and was like, okay, like you have a very big platform. You have posted this video. I have a decently sized platform. We have unwittingly promoted this person who is now causing harm.
Right.
We need to do our best to rectify that.
I feel like, and, you know, too, as you're talking, I'm thinking, you mentioned the gaslighting. And of course, you know, the main focus was ADHD medications and, you know, medications that treat various psychological conditions, depression, anxiety. And pain medication. So you're kind of, not you, Truth was targeting this really vulnerable population of people who are probably more likely to blindly follow someone because they have spent their lives being caused harm because doctors don't believe them, their peers don't believe them, their family, friends. Oh, you're, you know what, seeking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also just kind of really specifically targeting people who are neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
Because those of us who are neurodivergent tend to be more trusting. And some of us, not all of us, of course, you know, it's all a spectrum, but I can at least speak for myself that when it comes to red flags of someone maybe being dishonest, I'm better with it now through extensive, you know, therapy to try to learn how to do it. But like our lie detection mechanism in our brain is it's not great.
It's a lot easier for us to not trust ourselves than not trust other people, I think.
Exactly. So, you know, at first I was like, well, this person, you know, when some of the stuff started to come out about Truth, I was like, well, maybe it's not as nefarious as we think. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, no, this really is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw your message, I have some unfortunate information about this person. Just the way you presented it was very, it felt trustworthy. I don't know why. Maybe it was because it wasn't like, hey, you shouldn't be promoting this bad information. Like it was like, hey, and so I guess we can jump into how your interactions started, where it started to go, and kind of how it ended.
Yeah, so where it started off is someone actually that I had been speaking to who is a disabled chemist on TikTok. They're a fantastic individual, have been actually very genuinely helpful and given me some information and context as I've entered into this world that I knew nothing about prior to doing this investigation. I went, hey, here's another person who's been doing this investigation. Like, you should connect with them. You should talk to them about this, see if there are resources that you guys can combine. And I was like, oh, amazing. Like, instead of feeling alone in this and being like going down this rabbit hole myself, here's maybe an institution or someone with money that will be able to like fund this. Because the biggest issue, like you've been saying, is getting lab testing. Because as I've learned, the machines to get these tests are extremely expensive. The processes to make sure that this testing happens properly takes like months to happen. It's like a very in-depth process. So I was like, oh, if someone's already been doing this, that saves me so much time and effort to prove. And then we can move forward with like getting people help and holding people accountable.
Right.
And so had a call with Truth. I went, hey, like, I'd love to talk to you about this. And Truth went, okay, do you have time to call right now? And I went, oh, sure. I was over at my partner's house. I had just smoked a little bit of marijuana. And so I was like, fine, okay, yeah. And I rushed back to my apartment. The documentarian I've been working with is actually my roommate, which is so fortunate. He's like an incredible documentarian. He's made some really cool stuff. And so I was like, hey, get your camera ready. Like, we're going to set up an interview right now. And this might be groundbreaking.
I love it.
Get
How
in, jump in.
too, as a journalist. What? How exciting as a journalist and as a documentarian. Like, you know, these are the moments where you're just like, this is gold. This is going to like put us on the radar, you know? So like, even from a professional perspective, this is, you know, troubling.
And I had no idea even like what I was walking into. I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is a call. This is someone who's been doing this. Like, maybe this will be helpful. We jump in. the opening of the conversation, they say, which should have been a red flag for me immediately, was, for the intents and purposes of this conversation, you can call me Truth.
Anyone who here's something, if I've learned anything from this, anyone who has the name Truth in their name, in their bio, it says,
Truth teller, truth seeker.
I keep it real. Anyone who's like, yeah, everybody lies and I'm just telling the truth, that they are a pathological liar. I'm sorry, I don't like to group people in together, but like it's a red flag. They're pathological.
Absolutely.
Liars.
And if they're not, they need to be held to a very high level of scrutiny.
Correct. I agree.
And so that first conversation we had was groundbreaking, I thought. I was like, oh, this information this person is giving me, like, is indicative of a medical scandal at a scale that is like has never been seen before, like literally a like Watergate level groundbreaking story. And I was like, oh my God. And my roommate was there, the documentarian. We were like, just the amount of sheer shock we were in listening to this, because like there were some specific details about medications and like, yeah, we tested a medication and it only had like fractional percentages of how much the active ingredient should be in there. And then another red flag I should have noticed in the beginning was they were talking about this process of how they had to get onto this unmarked lab, of how they walked onto the campus. They had to sneak in through different routes. They all had to fly in from different areas of the country to get to this lab and would stay there for days at a time and then fly out. And I was like, okay, well, and like what I found myself doing was like, okay, I'm trying to justify this for them, yes, as opposed to being like, okay, let's slow down and take this at a grain of salt level. But the issue is that the level of expertise they spoke with kind of overruled that. Like the level of jargon that they had really overruled that. And I was like, okay, cool. The interesting thing though is as soon as we got off that conversation, they were expecting me to like write a story about it right away. They were expecting me to post videos about their conversation right away. While also emphasizing like, you need to make sure that we stay safe and keep us anonymous. And like, this is our safety on the line. And I was like, my number one thing is making sure that like you stay safe. Like, I don't want to risk you. I don't want to jeopardize your investigation. And so this was April 29th.
Okay.
Then as it continues to proceed, I'm like, hey, do you have documentation? Because like my editor needs proof before we can move with the story. Like we need evidence before we can publish anything. I don't even want to publish anything before this June 8th date comes out.
Right.
And so she kept telling me, she's like, you get exclusive access to this story. Like I'm in contact with other individuals. Yeah, right. You get exclusive. You're going to be the first person to get this information. All the information is going to go out. You'll get it in the morning. And then all of these other news channels that I'm connected to are going to get it later in the day.
Right.
And I was like, okay, sure. And like, yeah, like very much like, oh, wow, this is going to be amazing for my career. This is going to be amazing for like pushing the story forward and like benefiting these now thousands of people who I have this evidence for. To date, I have like 2,400 survey results from people of various ADHD medications saying they're not working.
Right.
And so as this continues to go on, Truth then evolves a bit from it being a strictly professional relationship to trying to develop some kind of like friendship, of being like, oh, like we're the only people who understand this. We're the only people who get it. And it very much was trying to utilize my experience as someone who has existed publicly on the internet to how to navigate all of this like hate that she was getting in TikTok comments.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, sometimes you just got to like deal with it. Like, you know that this is true. So like, why do you feel so compelled to prove yourself to all of these negative comments? Just like delete them or block them. Just like keep going with what you're doing.
Right.
And then as I continued to ask from documentation, she would say, okay, I have it. I have like 70 documents or whatever. I'm going to send you over email, but the documents were too big, so they couldn't get uploaded. And then every time that I would ask for it, something else would happen. Like there would be someone who had tried to sneak onto campus and so she had to talk to the police, or she would be in the hospital for her like polycystic disease, or like all of these various illnesses that she had. And then she dropped the bomb, like, I got diagnosed that I had 3 years to live 18 months ago. And like all of these things that like very clearly were trying to divert from me getting actual evidence to me feeling bad for her. And then the thing that I think is not most dangerous on a large scale, but most like personally fucked up is that she used specific details of like her identity, quote unquote, of being like, I'm queer, I'm poly, I'm autistic, I am all of these things that you also are. I have a trans man who's my boyfriend, and like I'm going through this right now, and using these specific using these specific details about her life to get closer to me on a non-professional level. Yeah, so they were using all of these specific identity markers to convince me that I should trust them even more, despite every time something happening when they could try and send me evidence. And so this had gone on for a couple of months, and it was really starting to affect me because I was like staying up through the night to be like, oh, these documents are almost sent. Like, if they're almost sent, then I should be getting them right now. And so this kind of like sent me personally into a little bit of a manic episode, because as this was all happening, I was investigating the real stuff of like all of these lawsuits, all of these timelines, all of these various things of like these companies and where these executives from these companies have gone, like from the opioid crisis, all of the companies impacted by the opioid crisis, the executives left those companies and then went to other companies
to do the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like and then seeing all these connections, like Lynette bought the patent for Adderall from Teva, and Teva and Shire are actually connected in a facility in Japan that they co-own.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's all like very quiet. It's basically a quiet monopoly of like all of these companies collaborate together to make sure that they all get the most money, and all of the public facing like lawsuits or disputes are all just kind of a smokescreen to be like, we're all in this together. We're all going to make money. Like, don't worry about it.
And that right there is like, that right there would make great content for a documentary.
Mm-hmm.
But this other side of it with this person who's, supposedly has this like intel. And like, and you don't have to share directly, besides the whole, we tested the formularies, there was like such a small amount of the actual active ingredient. Did Truth tell you anything else specific? Or was it all like, smoke and mirrors?
They were talking to me about patients that they had on campus, that they supposedly had rounds upon rounds of individuals that they were monitoring.
I did see that in the text you sent me. One of them had anaphylaxis.
And I was wondering, actually, as you were mentioning that, had she spoken to you prior to that, that then made her think, oh, I can mention this and it'll make it seem more real?
Yes, I mentioned MCAS and stuff. And when it came to me, Truth told me, yeah, I'm disabled. I have like a chronic health condition too. And, I'm like, okay, I don't think Truth got the response. I was like, oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. I don't think Truth got the almost like feeling of solidarity that they were expecting out of me in that. And I mean, honestly, it's because of what I'm going through with the hospital system. As much as I was like, no, I believe this is going on, I still was like, this person works in healthcare.
Absolutely.
So my trust for them is, I trust their story. I don't trust them specifically. So I was like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't feel that sense of like solidarity with them that I think they were expecting. So they kind of really didn't talk to me very much. I would send them questions here and there, but they didn't talk to me as much as clearly they were in correspondence with you almost all the time. And I have to notice too, which will become a later development in the story that we can get to in a minute, the timestamps, always very late at night. Always during the day unavailable. I noticed that too. And we'll get to that when we get to that later. But so that's interesting. Okay. So, they did say specific stuff and specific details.
And I kept pressing for specifics, but not because I was being like, I need you to give me specifics. But I was also being manipulated into being like, anytime I would ask for too much, they would start to push back. And I'd be like, okay, fine. Like, I am trying to pursue this story and I don't want to jeopardize the access that I have to the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually it came to a point where I was like, okay, and the numbers would keep going up from like 70 documents to a couple hundred documents to a couple thousand documents. And the numbers of how many people were in this test started to increase. And those were my initial red flags when I started to not trust them and pull back anymore. And why it eventually got to the point where I was like, okay, well, if you have all of these documents on 6 USBs and all these specific numbers that you're giving me, come to New York. Like, come to New York and hand them to me personally.
Right. I mean,
also, I'm working with a class action lawyer currently. I'm in contact with them, figuring all this out. They were actually the initial person who was like, I don't trust this individual because of these specific details. I don't doubt that something like this could be happening because of my experience with large companies. But this individual is kind of setting off some red flags for me. And that's when I was like, I'm very glad I was in contact with this individual who is very helpful. But that was like, okay, fine. Well, the only proof that I can have solidly is if I am in person going over this with you. And then they didn't show up.
I also noticed, because I have been catfished. I'll say once, but it was more so 3 times by the same person. It wasn't a romantic situation. It was a friendship situation. I was friends with this girl on MySpace. She said she was, from like a German immigrant or something. And we were friends. So I went to Philadelphia to meet her. And there was this huge tragedy that happened. She had a miscarriage. So I had to instead talk to her friend who had the same exact accent. But I was like, okay, I see what's going on here. This girl that I'm talking to instead is obviously the girl I was really talking to. Mm-hmm. And she was catfishing me, but she does want to be friends. I will just pretend like this other lady who doesn't exist just fell off the face of the earth. We'll never bring her up again. And we were friends for 5 years. She would come to New York all the time and visit me. I was never allowed to go visit her. And then as it turned out, because this other girl that had to talk to me because the one girl was like having a miscarriage. She was from Russia. All of it was a lie. She was from Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. She does this to people. She just catfishes people. For what? She never got any money out of me, nothing. But I noticed one of the things that I found that catfishes do, there's always a tragedy. Mm-hmm. And not to say that's not I'm sure people say that about me. I've seen comments in my comment section. Oh my God, it's always something with this girl. Oh my God, there's always something going on with her. And I understand that some people just have shit going on. Mm-hmm. But it's the formula. It's like a formula they follow. Hey, just wanting to know how those documents are. Oh, it's on 1%. And then disappear for 24 hours. I'm sorry, I was in the hospital. This terrible, horrific thing.
And where you can't go up against it because it's so bad, of being like, if I question the fact that this tragedy happens to you, I look like an asshole.
Right. And who knows? I'm looking at these screenshots. So what are these screenshots specifically? I see, did it work from Truth? Yes. Perfect. Burner number used worked perfect, Truth says. And I think you said, I believe you can block the number. And they said how in settings, I believe. They said it's a burner. I can still block it. I think the area code is middle of nowhere, Indiana. What?
Oh, so I have done a lot of organizing work in the past of trying to communicate through encrypted means and hiding information. So being I think I actually I was thinking of Telegram rather than Signal. Okay. Where you can hide your phone number from the individual that you're talking to.
Got it.
Because that would add an extra layer of safety in the event that any of this was real.
Okay, so so when they said burner number is from middle of nowhere, Indiana, what was Truth referencing there?
That's referencing the number that I was speaking to them currently. So the number that they were talking to me through Signal, which, as we now know, is a phone number that is traced to an actual individual with a real name and a real job.
Correct. And we're going to get into that. I'm looking. Do you have any update? Yeah. Do you have any updates on the labs? Ran into a problem. My legal team gave me guidance of talking to your editor. Thanks for the update. We have a few other creators reached out, turned them down as we were working with you, which is not true, clearly, because they were talking to me. First two places didn't have computers, they said. And then
this is when they were trying to upload documents and then they couldn't do it. So they wanted to go to a public library to upload these documents.
So my thing is, right, and I'm not at all, again, I have fallen for stuff like this. So this is not at all a question of like, how did you fall for that? Because I absolutely would have too. It's more so a question of like, what specifically did they tell you that their line of thinking was? Because was it they had to go to a public library because they couldn't send it directly from their job because they were sending you the stuff in secret?
Partially. Okay. That was partially it. It was also, this was the time when they allegedly had people on their campus when like the U.S. Marshals or whatever had shown up on their campus, which U.S. Marshals don't do that. That's not what their jurisdiction is. They were really preying on my ignorance and lack of information of how a lot of things worked. And that's definitely, it has been a big lesson for me as a journalist to be like, okay, I'm not an expert on everything and cannot be an expert in everything. So I need to, and that's kind of this process of like speaking to people who are experts and being like, is this a thing that could have happened? And then being like, absolutely not.
I mean, that's a great documentary right there, too. Like, kind of like, I think this is actually in the long run, as traumatizing as this has been, I think this is going to put you so much more on the radar because the documentary and this whole process and like this has become a much bigger story of like, yes, there's something going on with Big Pharma. This person has totally, fooled me and a lot of thousands of people on the internet. And
millions even, because they had millions of views.
And, and how this has kind of, transformed you as a journalist because, like, obviously I'm not saying this is the same situation, but my first feature film that I produced, I wrote it, I did everything, right? It's still in post-production, but like, I wrote a film and I needed a backstory to the main character, which I didn't have. And this friend I made on a film set told me the story about how she grew up across the street from a serial killer who was never caught. And I trusted my friend. I never thought to look into it. And
why would you lie about that?
Right. But, as time went on, it became very clear that this was not true. And, and again, it was like, as a producer, the first thing I should have done was Google it. And I didn't. So, it's these things though, that like, thank God they're happening now, as opposed to like, we have, we're these well-respected, journalists, filmmakers, and then like, something like this happens later and we lose all credibility, know? Yeah, I'm seeing. So then Truth says, I'm 70% done loading the docs to send. Photos on a separate email, at least 76%. Why couldn't they just send it in a Google Doc or something? This is so strange.
So the thing that I think they were thinking about Google Docs, or the logic that I was filling in for them.
That's what I did too with the person with the serial killer. So I totally get that. That must be a neurodivergent thing too.
I think it's also because as like neurodivergent people, it's very on us to not understand like social cues and not understanding how things work. We've had to fill in things because we're like, okay, why is someone mad at me right now? Like, why is someone acting this way around?
Right, because we have, what is it, top down, bottom?
Yeah, top down thinking, absolutely.
Top down thinking or whatever, yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, where we look at the pieces to try to put a puzzle together, and people who are not...
It's pattern recognition.
Do the opposite, where they're like, someone's mad at me. Let's figure out why. And we're like, they look upset, maybe? Are they upset? Are they hungry? You know what I mean? We're just kind of like observing. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
And so my thing with the Google Docs was like, okay, well, if this is really encrypted information, if this is really sensitive information, Google Docs is not an encrypted server. Like anyone could break into Google Docs. Like that is a very easy thing to jeopardize an investigation if it needs to be top secret hush hush. And so the story they gave me about who was funding, because I did ask the questions of like, who is funding this investigation? Where did the money come from? Which actually my co-author, James, was really helpful in like grounding, having another co-author on this story to constantly like check and be like, hey, like what's going on with this was really, really helpful. And I'm so grateful for him. It was very much, they were like, okay. And they gave me this very specific story of this very rich individual who had a wife who went on a generic form of a medication. And the side effect of this medication was like aneurysms, which is a real thing that medications can do. But she had an aneurysm and then it kind of got brushed under the rug. And that's why he was like setting up this systemic review of medications, because he was like, I need to prove that my wife didn't die for no reason.
And this is a real thing that happened.
I believe so. I was looking into it, and like it seems like that is something that happened. And the same thing with
Truth, correct?
No, that came from Truth. That's like this was who was doing it.
Oh, okay, interesting. Did Truth ever give you a name?
Nope.
Huh. Interesting. I wonder if it's a lot of times the pathological liars, and we'll get to the proof of the pathological lying in a second, because I know chat's like, oh, what's going on? The thing is, there is usually with pathological liars, as opposed to people who exaggerate or lie just for ha-has, where there's usually just somebody who lies a lot or whatever. There's usually a grain of truth and then they exaggerate it. It's a grain of truth in their own life. Pathological liars, on the other hand, for instance, this girl I was like best friends with who said she grew up across the street from a serial killer, and she told me this whole story. The grain of truth was that there was an almost identical case in the same area in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the same years. And the guy was caught. It was the guy, they called him the Taco Bell Strangler.
Charlotte. That's wild. And like, I know what you're talking about, actually.
Yeah, Taco Bell Strangler. Yeah. Her story was almost identical. So like her grain of truth was this other story. So like Truth telling you this other story is very plausible that that story is true.
And another one was, there is an individual, and this is completely true. You can find news stories about it. An individual who woke up during surgery because the amount of sedation they were supposed to be under was not enough, and they woke up. And like, that is a real thing that did in fact happen.
Yes. Yes, I know. I've seen a few stories like that. So I will say, obviously, you know, I take everything with a grain of salt. When the first time I spoke to you, you seemed very trustworthy.
I appreciate that.
So, you know, the thing that really got me, though, was this email that was included in the receipts you sent me, because I made that video being like, you know, even if it's wrong, that's why I said in my video, could I be wrong? Yeah, but that's not my problem. I would rather protect whistleblowers, potentially, than, you know, just let these entities get away with something terrible. And when I was looking through the emails, and you sent me this email that Truth forwarded to you on
a month prior to talking about
May 13th, an identical email: to whom it may concern, due to my job sensitivity, I cannot disclose my personal information past saying that I have level 2 clearance at this company. You have made some big waves regarding sensitive information about particular manufacturers. I understand we have reached out via cease and desist notices in the past few weeks, which at that point, I only know this because I'm going through my own stuff. At that point of cease and desist, they don't contact you by email and say, hey, by the way, we sent you a cease and desist. You get a court summons, usually from an attorney being like, okay, we told you this is how much we're going to sue you for if you keep yapping and you're still talking. So now we're going to court. I'm not sure that you were aware of the dangers associated with leaking this type of information, as you seem to be very adamant about not stopping the spread of this information. I would have our legal team reach out to you and possibly come up with some agreement that would be favorable to all parties involved, including but not limited to compensation for your time and assurances that the current actions would stop. Obviously, this is very time sensitive, so dwelling on your decision too long is not recommended. I look forward to hearing from you regarding these issues and opportunities. Now, something I didn't catch in the thing that I posted was that the wrong form of to was used. O as opposed to TOO, not too long. So in the thing that I posted, it said TO as opposed to TOO. The one you sent me from a month prior has the same spelling error.
So my thing, this is, and I'm going to be like fully transparent about this, is very problematic of me. A lot of this is generic companies based in people whose English is their second language. And so in the event in which someone had sent this email, that's a normal spelling error that one who is like learning English as a second language could make. But also someone who is dyslexic, like Truth said they were. Something I've noticed a lot in the comments from all of these like anonymous TikTok accounts who are like defending Truth all have the same type of spelling errors and the same like cadence and pattern to their sentence structure. As an editor, like that is very much something I'm aware of. I'm like, oh, this is the same person.
Yeah, and there was one profile in particular. What was it? It was
Lazy Taco.
a Lazy Taco. And there's another creator who for a long time has been saying this person is not telling
Chris. Yeah, Chris is great.
And Chris was like, I'm pretty sure the Lazy Taco is them. And it was because, they reached out to me after they saw that you and I were talking and said, I wouldn't trust that journalist. I have extensive documentation of like problematic things they've been saying. And like, they know things and they're just trying to like side. And I was like, okay, email them to me. And then they didn't just block me, they deleted the account. And here is where I really was like, this is a problem. The moment that video I made took off, thank you so much for the video, blah, blah, blah. And then I talked to you and then I made that other video being like, hey, by the way, this person might be full of it. Account gone.
Mm-hmm.
Gone.
Instantly.
And as far as I know, it's not returned.
So fun fact, my co-author James, who is brilliant, this was the smartest thing that anyone has ever done, documented and uploaded their TikTok account to the Wayback Machine.
Mm-hmm.
So it is currently archived, that all of these videos and comments and all of that is still present, even though they deleted their account now. So we have it for the future.
That is good to know, because a lot of the even text messages they were getting with like threats and stuff was like, let me see. I'm seeing these other things because I know there was like a few. What was this Fort Wayne? Because you said, good morning, checking in. If I'm not wrong, you should be getting the second flight in a few minutes, because going back to you saying, hey, if we're so worried about privacy, I'll fly you out to New York.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you they were traveling from.
So their initial flight information that they gave me 2 weeks prior to them coming out was a flight from Fort Wayne that had an overlay in Chicago to New York.
Where's Fort Wayne?
Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Interesting. Where did they tell you they were from Indiana?
They did not. They said they were from the middle of nowhere.
They told me they were from the Carolinas.
So I have two phone numbers. One that is traced back to South Carolina, I believe, and one that is traced to Garrett, Indiana.
Yes. Clearly this person is from Indiana. Like, I also looked up, the number and stuff and traced it. It is a real number. It's not a Google number. It comes up as not a landline. It comes up as a cell phone provider.
Mm-hmm.
The phone number has been listed under two different names.
Mm-hmm.
The last person to own the phone number, who is not involved at all, their name is December, which doesn't matter because who cares? They're not involved in this.
The only connection it has is the fact that the fake name that they gave both of us was August. I
thought that was interesting, and I wonder if that's related or not. I thought that was strange. But both numbers, even the one from when this December person owned the number was from also Garrett, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
So the number is traced to there regardless. And when I think I sent you the video of my partner calling the number.
Hey, is this December?
I'm sorry?
Is this December? I'm looking for a girl named December.
Oh, yeah, it hasn't been their phone for like over a year now.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you so much.
Do you know any family of theirs or?
Yeah.
Anything? Yeah, so we get like aunts texting us, like the whole nine, and we responded and it just keeps happening. Like, I don't know if she's like, okay, I guess you might want to like try to find her. I'm sorry, I have no idea.
Okay, no, I'm sorry for bothering you.
No, you're good.
Yeah,
have a good night.
You too.
And saying, hey, is December there? And the person went, no, actually, people call a lot. And it was almost like this weird, like, no. But do you know?
You should check in on them.
Right. It's like, well, that's what I'm doing. And so if the number doesn't belong to December, then it can only belong to the other person that the number is traced to. And that other person just so happens to work third shift, which is nighttime, middle of the night, when she's always messaging people and this is the part where I'm like, this is a problem, more so than just scaring the crap out of people. People were having issues because they just abruptly stopped taking their meds. She works in healthcare. She works with very vulnerable individuals, like third shift at a, assisted living facility.
And this is clearly and this is how they had access to the type of knowledge and all these manufacturers, is because if they're working in this healthcare capacity, they have seen the names, they know the jargon enough to fake it for someone who doesn't.
Right. So interesting that they, the flight is weird. Clearly.
Oh, another interesting fact. So the night before they were supposed to fly out, they called me in a panic because they sent, as you have the screenshots of, that really random fake binary repeating number thing.
God, that is so cringy.
And don't forget that they also did a HIPAA violation and sent me someone's personal information about a burn care that they were sending to.
And I almost wonder if that was obviously intentional that they texted it to you. But I think it was just trying to make it look like they actually are, because they're not even what are they? They're like an assistant. They're not.
Yeah, they're like, yeah.
They are not a nurse. They do have access to patients, but they're not, they work in healthcare.
They also tried to do all of the conspiracy stuff of the name of the individual is the same name of a family that has all of this money, and the U.S. Marshal's name was the same name as one of the companies. They tried to do all of this large conspiracy stuff. And I think the interesting thing about the way they were lying was also when people were talking about this is related to the COVID vaccine or related to all things like that, they were trying to distance themselves from that to seem more credible. So the day they were supposed to fly to New York, the night before, they got this fake binary code and called me in a panic attack and kept being I'm nobody. Why is this happening? This is why I chose to do this, because I'm nobody. And I was being a decent person, was hey, calm down, take some breaths. It's okay. You're safe. Do you have someone else coming to be with you in the hotel to fly over? The person you're supposed to be coming to New York with. And then I was supposed to talk to that person on the phone, and they hung up. And then they sent me their new flight information, which was going from, I can't remember where the other place was, to New York.
FW4, the first one was Fort Wayne. And you're Fort Wayne.
Yeah, I was because they told me that I was where is your address? In case something happens to you, I want to know exactly where you are. They gave me a hotel in Kentucky. And I was so how are you getting from Kentucky to Fort Wayne and flying here then? Right. And they were what do you mean Fort Wayne? And then started to backpedal and then started to attack me and being why don't you trust me anymore? And I went, all right, fuck this. Yeah. And then they sent me a new flight information. And that's when I said, hey, if I'm not mistaken, you should be getting on your second flight right now. And they're well, we just woke up, da-da-da-da-da. We were supposed to meet that day. And I was supposed to pick them up from the airport.
Okay. And then it seems like something had happened where now they needed to take an Uber from the airport. And it also seems very clear that this person has never been to New York, or at least has never flown into New York, because there was some discrepancy between JFK and Newark, which, yes, they're close by. They're certainly not the same airport.
Well, they were originally supposed to be flying into Newark and then told me they were flying into LaGuardia. And then when I asked for their location, sent me the weird screenshot with the location cropped out of them going from JFK to the Central Library in Brooklyn.
So you did go there.
Yeah, because I was if this is real, I'll be, and there is the documentarian was with me. Literally, I was I know how crazy this is going to look all cut up of me just standing for 3 hours outside of the library. I know this is going to be a great shot, but emotionally, I'm devastated right now.
Right. And, then this is something that I've seen a lot of Catfish do. And I don't know if there's a handbook or something. The thing that they all do is they will be hello, why aren't you answering me? And then they will be and you're what are you talking about? You've been ignoring me for 3 hours. And then they send fake screenshots of all these fake texts that they supposedly send to you that for some reason you're not getting.
They didn't go through.
Which is so bizarre, and so I like that you I'm looking at you're looking at her so I like that you said send a picture of yourself. I've been here the whole time. If you are in fact at the bar, take a picture of yourself at the bar. I will block you if you do not send me a picture of yourself at the bar. They said not in the bar. I just got your messages. This is the thing that I was like, they're definitely, we just walked to the gas station to grab waters and a snack. Where in New York are you, first of all, walking to a gas station? Second of all, if there is some random gas station, like kind of like on the outskirts of like, Astoria or something, if you're like in that area, like they're probably still not going to really have snacks. Maybe
like there's some gas stations in Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, like they could have walked to, but like they have a mini mart that you have to ask for it through a like glass window for, where you could just, and that's like a mile away from where we were. Right. Where instead you could just walk into a bodega.
Right. The person did send you a picture.
Yes, they did send me a picture of who they are prior to this, who they are, quote unquote. I don't know whose images they're using, which is also a problem.
I know. I couldn't find them anywhere. Like none of these like Pim Eyes, Tin Eyes, nothing is finding this person.
And I don't really understand that. I feel bad for whoever is being used, because I also asked, I was like, hey, like they're like specifically, I was like, hey, that tattoo that you have on your hand, you have a butterfly tattoo on your hand. That's a really cool tattoo. Then sent me an image of that butterfly tattoo, like having freshly been done. And so I was like, that is so strange that you were able to do that. And I don't really understand how that's possible.
Can you send me that picture?
Yeah, I can send you it.
I would, email it to me or something, because I would like to try to track this person down, because it's either someone they know personally or it's someone on social media. If it was someone on social media, something should have come up in some sort of reverse image search.
Unless it's like a private account, right? And like that's would be the only thing I was thinking of. Like if it's a private account that they are friends with, then you wouldn't be able to look it up because it would have that like privacy wall.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. I mean, the thing is,
my boyfriend has also been aggressively attempting to find anything about this person.
Because it would just be interesting to know who the person is. Now, I feel, obviously, I'm going to post a video about this whole thing, because I got a message today from a fairly large creator, well over 200,000 followers, being like, what's going on with the medication stuff? And I was like, unfortunately, that person wasn't being honest. So, I'm going to be posting a video, and I'm keeping up the original video I made. I'm going to probably just reply to a comment so people can see it, because people are curious. And the biggest thing at the end of the day is the fact that when I said this is not correct, account gone.
Immediately. Well, this is also the time when I then started replying to this person is lying. Like everyone should know that this person is lying. And then the Lazy Taco, when they started talking about specific things of specific instances in our conversation they were referencing. And I was like, how do you know that? How do you know these specific moments in the conversation I had individually? And there was another account with the name Maya that was posing as a healthcare individual that was like, this is why your study is bullshit, da 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 da. And I was like, oh, you have the same sentence structure as Unfiltered Truth. And then they deleted their account.
And I know they're probably watching this too, or they're going.
I hope so. I hope you are.
I hope so too, because I know I felt almost like not telepathically, but I felt the moment that they saw I posted a video and saw Rowan tagged. I felt the stomach drop they must have felt, you know what I mean? Crap. And I think pathological liars need to stop. At the end of the day, I'm sure it's, they have some kind of underlying issues, which I understand and I have empathy for. However, when you start to kind of tokenize someone's, what makes them who they are. Now, I don't even want to say struggles, but what makes someone who they are, it's obviously not easy to, trans people have so many struggles, and to be like, I totally understand where you're coming from. My husband is trans, when it's just absolutely not true.
Well, also that they were in a throuple. Like this was like, I am poly, I have like, that's a whole thing, but they were like, yeah, no, I'm in a throuple and I have a trans boyfriend and my girlfriend, and we all live together in this house. Like they were just like making up a whole story. A lot of my friends who know about this have a theory that on top of like the pathological lying that they were doing, became a little bit infatuated with me personally.
Yes.
Hence why the personal things started to get developed.
I agree. The way they would kind of talk with you and be very like, it almost seemed like if you, okay, well, thanks. Can you get me those documents? Or if you were like a little bit more like, hey, sorry, I was like busy today or something. It was like, my kidneys are failing. I need emotional, like almost like I need emotional support from you. I need support from you. And the other thing I found too, which I think you also found, was they had an account that has been since deleted, and it was previous to Unfiltered Truth.
Well, that was the same account renamed.
Got it. Because it was
Emotional Support Paw.
And I saw they were speaking a lot with this one creator who is a survivor of Munchausen's by proxy.
Yep, I also found that.
And what really upset me was this person with this account, is sharing their struggle with something that is not that well understood. It's not talked about that often. And, it's not something that you hear about every day. And it just seems like this person takes whatever makes someone who they are, especially if it's a more vulnerable part of them or a perceived vulnerability. Then they'll kind of like run with it. Like, like when they were with me, like, oh, I'm disabled. And it's like, well, I don't view my disability as a vulnerability. But, I could see why somebody who's able-bodied would. Like, it's like they're saying these things that they perceive as a soft point on someone that they can kind of like get in. And I think the other thing that's a huge problem, which I'm not comfortable releasing this person's name publicly because I'm not about that. However, I think her employer needs to be notified, if for no other reason than the egregious HIPAA violations, where she would just make it seem like she was texting another coworker about one of the patients there, just accidentally sending it to you, just to make it look like I think she's more of a nurse than she actually is. Maybe let's hope those people aren't real. Let's hope that she just made it up and who cares? But like, I think her employer needs to know that she's doing that. Those could be real people.
And well, there's also the factor of like that she was getting people to send her medication.
I forgot that part. I'm so glad you brought that up. So that was when I was like, this is a problem, because she kind of did it with me and then she kind of never brought it up again. But there are people I've spoken to. None of them are comfortable being named. They did say I could put their screenshots in this video, just like, anonymously. I've gotten probably 3 different people who have sent.
And how many more are there?
Controlled substances, specifically. Oxycodone and Adderall. Yeah.
And so that, I was having a really hard time after all this, being like, why would someone do this? Like, I can't understand and can't justify why anyone would go through all this trouble for anonymous TikTok clout.
Anonymous. That's the thing. It's not even for fame. It's like they're just playing pretend. I guess the pills could.
I do think that might be it. I do think that getting some medication, because also if they are actually disabled, because that might be a thing that would make sense if they have like all of these various chronic illnesses, are in all this kind of pain, getting these kinds of infusions. If you are dependent on this medication and it's genuinely not working as well as it used to, then you can manipulate people into getting more and having a higher chance of it eventually working.
That's true. I also think that is like such a weird part of it. Like, what happened to those medications? They're putting people at risk. because that's not legal. And
that's a crime. Yeah.
That's a crime. And they were clearly, not telling people that. And that's the thing. That's why a lot of people are afraid to come forward because they're like, I don't want to get in trouble. And I'm like, valid. I totally get that.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to be like, I did that. I mean, I personally would because like, I don't care. Like I would blame them, I guess, but it's not legal. You're not supposed to do it. And the other part too, crap, I just lost my train of thought, but it was related and it felt important. It was about.
Well, while you're getting there, another thing like about my own personal investigation of this ADHD medication, a lot of people are very frustrated with me of being like, we just got to get the medication tested. We just got to get lab tested. How can I send you medication? I am very adamantly like, don't send me medication. Don't mail anyone medication until you have like a lab that you are working with that can do it legally. Because that is a federal crime to send controlled substances through the mail.
It absolutely is. And I would like to know the address that it was being sent to. I haven't been able to get that from anyone yet, but I would like that. I also saw that a direct relative of this person, I think I sent you the screenshots, was arrested on a massive
right. Yes.
bust. And there is some, not saying that, you can be related to someone and, you don't have the same lifestyle as them. However, I thought it was interesting.
And a lot of this is all like speculation and correlation because like even this person that we are pretty sure is this individual, we still don't have proof. We still don't have solid foundational, like this is the person who did this. And that part I think is the hardest of being like, we won't know until there is like a proper confrontation. And that may never happen. And that is difficult.
And that's the tricky part, right? And I think the fact that somebody is potentially breaking the law.
Yeah. With
the HIPAA violations alone is a good starting point. Because it's like, I don't know if this person actually works for you or not. I don't know if any of these people are your patients, but you need to be aware.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody registered with this phone number who works at your facility is sending out people's private medical information via text message. And, at that point, who knows if they would say yes, no, maybe. But at that point, it's like, okay, because I think if this person is truly getting controlled substances through the mail, that's a problem. Because like, what are they doing are they taking them? What are they doing?
Yeah, are they taking them? Are they selling them? Are they like swapping out medications? Like whatever they're doing, it's not good. They're not going to get the medication tested. They're not doing the intended thing they're saying they were doing.
And I would love to think that's the goal, but like so few people I think would be sending the medications. And it's also just like the other accounts like, oh, I'm dedicating this account to being a victim of munchausen's by proxy. Well, now that's not getting the popularity I want. It really just seemed to be this anonymous popularity of playing this superhero character. Meanwhile, kind of just piggybacking off people that are like true, like superheroes, like you being an investigative journalist, touching on these things that a lot of people are just like, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to look into it. You're doing the legwork. You're talking to real people, who are experiencing this stuff. Like you are that hero. Like, I do this like advocacy work, against, like patient abuse and stuff like that. Like kind of just, it's almost as if they wanted to play this character.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of just doing something like advocacy work or something, it was like, they wanted to play this kind of like Mr. Robot, anonymous, like, do you know what I'm saying? Just like kind of.
Did you see the initial videos? I didn't see any videos about Munchausen by proxy. I just saw the comments on that video.
Mm-hmm.
But there was the anonymous of like, we will stand together. If we stand together, we can rise up. Like very much like anonymous style, like exactly what you're saying, wanting to be this superhero without doing any of the actual work.
And I don't think we'll ever know what satisfaction comes out of anonymous attention.
It must be the dopamine rush of seeing the comments, of having people say, thank you so much for doing this. Like, this is happening to me. Like, it has to just be for a personal gratification of a life that she feels so discontent with in reality that she gets to have this secret double life.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of it is. Like that girl that catfished me that I was friends with for years, she ended up dying actually. But interestingly enough, my boyfriend's best friend got a new roommate. The new roommate was this girl who catfished me best friend. And we figured it out by accident because I saw this girl post on her Instagram a picture of this girl I was friends with. And I was like, I showed my boyfriend, I'm like, and he's like, what the hell? How do they know each other? And I walked in the room, I'm like, how do you know this person? She's like, oh my God, you're Tara from New York. I was like, she's like, I knew I recognized you. I was like, what happened? She's like, she just died. I was like, oh my God, she just died. I was like, that's so terrible. Like, does she have to go back to Russia? She's like, oh yeah, she was catfishing you. Right. No, she lives here. And I'm like, did she do this to a lot of people? She's like, yeah. I was like, oh, she must have been busy. She's like, no, most people didn't fall for it for more than like a few weeks. I'm like, oh, haha, I fell for it for 5 years.
That's so great.
That's fine. But like, I asked her friend, I was like, because she was transparent with her friend about being a catfish. And I was like, why? And she said, she's profoundly unhappy with the person she is. And it's kind of like playing house as a kid, like pretend. And it's as simple as that, where it's just this like, and I can't understand it. And I know you can't either, because it's like that if I get that feeling and I'm going to assume.
I change my life. I do something different with my life.
You just are like, I have this need to do something. I want to be this person. I want to, set an example. I want to be this hero. You go do it. Yeah.
I think at like the end of the day, more than like the feeling of betrayal or anything, it's just like a deep sadness of like, oh, that sucks. That really sucks that you have to do this and live this way because you're so unhappy, and you have to ruin other people's lives because of how unhappy you are with your own life.
Exactly. And I think that's the other reason why, I'm not, obviously I don't like publicly dragging anyone's name through the mud. But I think this is a little bit extra sensitive. I think it's important to make sure that this person is not doing anything dangerous, not disclosing people's private health information, not getting, who knows what they're doing with these medications, if they are in fact getting them. I think it's important to be like, hey, we kind of have a responsibility to make sure everyone's safe.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
There is that also massive level of empathy that I think you and I both have for this person. Like, this person is clearly not happy. And I don't want to make this person's life any worse, but in the same breath, I feel like there is a moral obligation to make sure that, some of this nefarious activity is also pretend.
And absolutely, I'm glad that we have now been able to like speak out about it so that way they stopped. Like the June 8th date came and went, and everyone was still like, what's going on? Oh my God, are you so unsafe? And I feel like if we had not said anything, they'd still be going and still be pushing the date back of being like, I'm unsafe, I'm getting these threats.
And that was the other thing that really tipped me off was after we had spoken, they're like, share this because I need to be safe and I need people to protect me. You're anonymous. Who are they? How's that
protect you from what?
Protect you from what? Nobody knows who you are. But that being said, you are actually doing the work on this, and you are working, with documentary filmmakers. You're doing the hard work. So I know there are people that are going to watch this. They're like, hey, but at the end of the day, my meds aren't working. Yeah, mine either. So
Same.
Where can people, first of all, I want to say there is something that people can do, which is go to the FDA website. You can.
Yes, the FDA MedWatch is a fantastic thing that everyone should do. Every time you get a refill of your medication that isn't working, just put in something to the FDA MedWatch, because eventually they're going to have to do something.
That's a big one. And is there anything that people, can they reach out to you? Is there anything that would help you? Is there anything like resources you have that you want to like share? So, because we don't want to just leave people off with like, but sorry guys, it was a lie. See ya. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So definitely like reporting to the MedWatch, reporting also, this is a lot of legwork, especially for people who are already having a lot of little executive function issues. Reporting to FDA MedWatch, reporting to your pharmacist, your doctor, and the company, making sure that you have a trail of like, hey, this isn't working. I've said this hasn't been working. And additionally, keeping track of your symptoms every day, being like, today, the medication is a little bit more effective, because in the eventuality that we do get to have a class action about all of this, having hard evidence documented from the time that you're experiencing it is solid evidence, more so than saying, oh, it hasn't been working for X amount of time.
It's like any class action where they're like, hey, Roundup, if you bought Roundup, here, class action, here's $20. Unless you have a receipt that you bought Roundup, now you get 1,000.
Yes, exactly.
It's like your receipt. So that's another good thing to kind of like, encourage people to do it, because I would imagine there will be some kind of class action at some point, and it'll probably be like any other class action with a pharmaceutical thing. But yeah, and also, if you have a good doctor, a good pharmacist, they should report it on your.
Like my thing, yeah, I've been talking to all of my, like every single medical professional of mine that I've spoken to has said that they've been experiencing this, that their patients have been experiencing this. So like, it's no longer a point where it's just a couple of people on the internet. It is now medical facilities across the country all being like, we have been getting these reports. Something is happening. We don't know what. And we just have to keep being persistent because bureaucracy works so slow.
It does. And I am almost willing to bet I took your advice too, where every day, because some days I'm like, well, like yesterday, I've been tracking it because yesterday morning I took my meds. I felt great. I took my second dose and all of a sudden I feel like I need to take a nap, which is, but some of them work, some of them don't in the same bottle.
Absolutely. And that's the confusing part is like, so kind of ending off on like what I've been trying to figure out what's been going on is I think there's just a lot of regulation issues in these companies because 90% of medications that we get in America are made by manufacturers in India and China. And the regulation overseas is so small. The way the FDA like registers and regulates companies is they give them at least a month's notice of when they're going to do the inspections on these factories. So they have time to clean their shit up. And all of the clinical trials, like I definitely highly recommend also this book, Bad Pharma.
Okay.
This book is very deep into like the flaws of clinical trials and the flaws of distribution chains, of like how easy it is for clinical trials to get hidden. Like 8 out of 10 studies on clinical medications aren't published because they don't show what the pharmaceutical manufacturers want them to show. And the ones that do get published are sponsored by the pharmaceutical companies.
More lobbying.
Exactly. It's all lobbying. It's all of that. It's all the fact that they are working off the fact that we don't know what we're putting into our own bodies and we're trusting these institutions. If you are experiencing this also, definitely you can DM me at Rowan Zeoli, or if you want to email me, rowanzeoli@gmail.com. Send me information. I am currently just working on ADHD medications, but I have no doubt it's expanding into other types of medications. I am compiling all of these various reports. And I have some videos on my own channel about the analysis of all this data and what it means. I don't think that most manufacturers are intentionally just putting out sugar pills. I don't really think that's happening. If anything, it's like a fractional amount. I do think it's probably less than what they're saying. Or the fillers, there's something with lisdexamfetamine. Another medication in it is called, the inactive ingredient is called microcrystalline cellulose. And I spoke to a chemist who has been looking into that. There's a huge issue with that right now in manufacturing, but microcrystalline cellulose can, at high levels, negate the effects of stimulants. There is also potential issues of protein absorption with COVID. There's a lot of things that this might just be multiple things all coalescing at the same time. And people are now just starting to speak out about it because we were just being gaslit about it before. And all of these things are snowballing because that's kind of what happens. It's one thing and then the dominoes just fall.
Yeah. And I think, to wrap up kind of like at the end of the day, the thing that sucks about Unfiltered Truth was that all this time that people are like, hey, somebody's handling it, someone's looking into it, was months of time spent where people weren't reporting it to the FDA, weren't reporting it to their doctors, weren't doing the things that they could do. So now we got to kind of like start now and hope for the best. Because even if it is like a protein absorption issue post-COVID, because, things are different post-COVID in our bodies. That's something that these companies need to be aware of so they can change their formulation. It might not even be that nefarious, but I appreciate the work you're doing. And I'm definitely going to link all of your social media so people can follow you.
Appreciate that.
Your email. And this has been awesome. And I know we'll keep in touch and we'll keep in touch. And if anything else comes up about it, obviously we're going to let people know. But
Yeah, I'm trying to find a new publication because the publication that I was working with lost all their investors, which is super weird, but I think that's more just like the state of digital media right now than anything like nefarious about me looking into this.
Right.
I really do think that once a publication picks this up, it'll be a little bit better, but that's a process, and I'm so sorry, everyone, that this is going so slow.
I mean, and that's the other thing about Unfiltered Truth. The speed at which things were coming together, I was like,
right?
A little bit too. You're dealing with bureaucracy, so it's not going to be quick.
Yeah. But I think I'm very glad that we got connected on this, despite it being under the worst possible circumstances. But I think people like us advocating for this, speaking up with the platforms that we have, that's the most important thing. Believing people and advocating for them and having genuine solidarity and not manipulated solidarity.
Absolutely. 100%. And I'm so grateful that you reached out to me. Cause I was vulnerable to hop on someone's live stream and be like, hey, by the way, this thing you're promoting is not true. So that, I appreciate you doing that. Cause I don't know if I would have been comfortable doing that. So,
You do what you can.